All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of the Jazziz Happy Hour. Thank you very much for joining me. I told you I'd be back. I hope you enjoyed our earlier conversation with actor Michael Imperioli. If you missed it, please go and check it out later. We talked to Michael about how he got into jazz and about his new podcast, Talking Sopranos. Michael will be taking part in the online gala for the Jazz Foundation of America, which is happening tomorrow night, May 14th at 8 p.m. So you don't want to miss it. And again, thank you to actor Michael Imperioli. You know him from The Sopranos for taking part in that part of the podcast. I am thrilled to be talking with our next guest. We're kind of going to stay in the area of jazz on film for a minute and bring in the creators behind a new documentary called Up from the Streets, New Orleans, the City of Music. It has a virtual cinema release this Friday, May 15th. And here to talk about it are going to be the film's director, Michael Murphy, and its executive producer and musical director, and frankly, one of its stars, trumpeter Terence Blanchard. Now, Terence's own history with film and music goes back a long ways, notably with his amazing film scores for the movies of Spike Lee. And he's won an Oscar and quite a few Grammys along the way. So they are both waiting in the wings, and we are going to be talking to them in a minute. But first, let me go ahead and thank some of this episode's sponsors. So firstly, thank you to Concord Records. They have a new album out right now called Ella 100, Live at the Apollo. This was a live recording from 2016 that celebrated Ella Fitzgerald, the first lady of song, recorded live at the Apollo, features performances by the likes of Andrew Day, Lettucey, Liz Wright, Cassandra Wilson, Monica Mancini, and the Count Basie Orchestra, led by trumpeter Scotty Barnhart. It was hosted by Grammy Award-winning vocalist Patty Austin and Tony Award-nominated actor David Alan Grier. Like I said, it's available for streaming and purchase right now. For more info, visit concord.com. Also, thank you to Blue Sound. We're all working from home now. We're all listening to a lot of music. I know I certainly am. Blue Sound is an award-winning wireless high-res sound system that lets you play music in any and every room throughout your home. One of those systems, where you can carry the speaker from the brunch place from your kitchen where you're eating brunch to the living room, to your bedroom, to your bathroom, wherever you want to listen to music. You choose your favorite music from a streaming service of your choice, hook it up to your home network, and then you can control where, at what volume, and when the music plays via the free Blue OS app. Getting the kind of crisp and detailed sound that only an audiophile grade system can deliver has never been easier. That's how you live hi-fi. I encourage you to check out these Blue Sound products on bluesound.com or by checking out our website, jazziz.com, where we have put together a Blue Sound Buyer's Guide. That same Blue Sound Buyer's Guide will actually appear in our summer 2020 issue, which is coming out in June. That issue is dedicated to the art of jazz fusion and that incredible era in music history. We're also running a subscription offer right now. For all of us stuck at home, we want to bring you more content than ever. We've put a lot of subscriber-only articles on our website, along with our digital monthly publications. And so we are running a subscription offer right now for just 99 cents per month for 3 months. You'll receive unlimited digital access. So every feature article, every exclusive interview that we publish, you'll have access to. You'll have access to our monthly digital issues that show up prepared very nicely with their own magazine cover in your inbox every month. Plus, we will enroll you to receive a complimentary print issue come June. So you get the 3 months of digital access plus that complimentary print issue for just 99 cents per month for 3 months. Come June, our summer 2020 issue, that special fusion issue will appear in your mailbox or on your doorstep. Anyway, that does it for me and my sponsor reads for the minute. We are going to bring in our special guests today, Michael Murphy and Terence Blanchard. I don't know if Terence is with us yet. He's got a lot of these live streams lined up for today. So we're going to start with just Michael Murphy, but hey, he made the film and he's got a lot to say about the history of New Orleans music. So Michael, are you there?
Yes, I am. How you doing, Brian?
Good, Michael. How you doing?
Good. Thank you for having
me. I know that question is relative these days, Everything's weird about these unprecedented times, but it's nice to be here chatting with you.
Yeah, this is great. So this is the new way of doing these things. So it's fantastic.
Absolutely. We should mention you are talking to us from New Orleans, your hometown. And I was just saying this to Delphio Marsalis the other day, who we had on the program. It must be so weird to live in New Orleans without music. Because you think in New York City, you can walk around New York City as long as you got, the buildings, the Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, the subway stations. You can kind of know you're in New York City. It's a very visual city. New Orleans is all about sound. I think it was you who said it in an interview as I was preparing for this conversation. It's in the air. The music is just in the air here. You breathe it in. It just must be very odd living in New Orleans without any live music.
Yeah, I mean, growing up here, I mean, it's weird, but then it's kind of working out. I mean, I grew up here, born and raised, and I remember as a little kid, we didn't have air conditioning, and my parents would leave the bedroom window open, and I would lay there. I was 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, whatever, and I'd hear these musicians practicing whether it was drums or horns or piano, off in the community, and that would sort of put me to sleep every night. And so now we have this, sort of lockdown, social distancing mandate, and what's happening now is that musicians who live in the neighborhood, they start playing instead of in the mornings, you hear them, everybody at 5, 6, 7 o'clock. They're on their porches on the front, and they're just entertaining the neighborhood by themselves. It's really quite cool.
Nice. Yeah, kind of taking it old school in a way to the way it used to be, where musicians just in the streets, on the stoops playing. Michael, you mentioned you've lived in New Orleans for a long time. You're a lover of New Orleans music. What made you finally now want to make this documentary? Was there a specific impetus for it?
Yeah, there was. It was the 300th anniversary of the city of New Orleans. And I started thinking about, this was in 2017, and I started thinking about making a very comprehensive film about the 300 years of the culture of this city through the lens of music. And I wrote this treatment, and I was hoping it could be, when you're talking about New Orleans music and its breadth and its depth, this could easily have been 4, 6, 8 part. But I was hoping to get it at least to be a 2-part, but that didn't work out. So I, spent 2.5 years making this particular film to cover what I initially proposed, which is covering 300 years. And it was quite a challenge.
Oh, it absolutely must have been. And, one of the joys of documentary filmmaking of this sort, or nonfiction writing, is kind of going in, not knowing what you're going to say, and keeping an open lens, so to speak, and discovering what it is the movie is all about as you go into it. So I'm curious, during the process of this filmmaking, were there surprising things about the history of New Orleans music, or even performers, artists that you didn't know about, that kind of popped into your consciousness? Any particular artists or moments in history stand out?
Well, I mean, I'm a student of the history of this city's music, and I knew pretty much where I was going to start in Congo Square and where I wanted to take it. And I have to say, the one area of music that I wasn't really well versed in and its significance was bounce music. Mm-hmm. And I asked Terrence about it, and he said, "Oh yeah, you gotta put bounce in." And I had the wrong sort of interpretation in my mind of what bounce represented. Once I sat down with Big Frida and Manny Fresh,
right,
it all came together, because they were saying the bounce scene, the New Orleans hip hop rap scene, it all extends all the way back to Congo Square and the second lines. There was a thread. And as soon as I had those conversations, I went, wow, okay, I got it. And it's one of my favorite segments in the film, the whole thing about how the rhythms of the city has been passed from generation to generation to generation, and it's still going on.
Yeah, totally. Bounce music, for people who don't know, it's kind of a house music, hip hop, early hip hop prototype, very specific to New Orleans. And you mentioned two big names there, Big Frida and Manny Fresh, who of course would also go on to be this acclaimed hip hop producer. But I want to take it back to, something you mentioned, Congo Square, which is, we've all kind of heard the name and, the lore of Congo Square, but I'm sure you can speak to this. what was it about Congo Square and that place and time in New Orleans that kind of led to the development of jazz and then subsequently all these other forms of music you're talking about, funk and bounce and hip hop? What was it about the social factors going on geographically, New Orleans, that was just the perfect combination that would lead to the creation of jazz?
Well, I mean, and I've got to sort of make sure I get it right, and Wynton Marsalis says it perfectly. But if I have my history again, and I'm pretty sure I do, New Orleans was the only city in the nation with slavery, but on Sundays in the South, on Sundays in New Orleans, the slaves were free to go to Congo Square, and they could perform. They could have their own markets. They could communicate with each other, and it was quite unique. So there were all these dances and music performances and playing by the slaves, by the Creoles, by the Native Americans, and it sort of started forming this foundation of the rhythms of the city's current music. You had the Latin influence, the Cuban influence, and all that sort of melded together. But it started at Congo Square, and Congo Square is also where, the cradle of jazz, as it's called, and it's a lot of folks have said it's the cradle of American music.
Right. Yeah, and you can hear it reverberate, just like you said, throughout, every music that came afterwards, which I think in some small way can trace its roots back to New Orleans, from rock and roll, certainly to, funk and contemporary hip hop. You mentioned somebody there, Wynton Marsalis, again, who speaks with great insight into the history of New Orleans music. You've got New Orleans icons, Harry Connick Jr., Ben Jaffe of the Preservation Jazz Hall. But what I also liked about the documentary is that you included the perspectives of people from outside of New Orleans. Sting, Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin. Why did you find it was so crucial to get that outsider perspective on the music of New Orleans?
That's a great question, and I've been filming the music of New Orleans for over 3 decades, and when I've always been asked the same question: why is the music of New Orleans still relevant? And a lot of that goes to the music industry. They'll say, jazz is sort of a niche genre these days, which I totally disagree with. I understand from record sales, but I've worked with Sting in the past. So for Sting, Sting, his first group was a jazz group.
Yeah.
And was influenced by New Orleans jazz music.
Right.
So his background is in jazz. When it came to Robert Plant, I was doing some reading about Robert Plant, and I did not know that as a musician or rock star, he always made a point of making sure his management gave he and the group a layover in the city of New Orleans, because they wanted to absorb all that music. So, when I approached Robert about this, he said, "What do you want to talk about?" And I said, let's just talk about, New Orleans, your music, your life. And what I thought was going to be a 1-hour meeting literally turned into 3 days with Robert.
Wow.
The one thing that it was so hard for me, and the current film, that's version 37. I made 37 different films.
Wow.
Before I ended up with this one. And a lot of the struggle was because I was telling this long story, and I couldn't break it up into different episodes. It couldn't be episodic. That I didn't have the financing. I decided that I had to give sort of an overview and give the breadth of the music of the city, but I couldn't go real deep. And I felt that the audience, if they were interested, they would look into the life of Louis Armstrong, and Mahalia Jackson, or the Nevilles, or the Meters, or the Mardi Gras Indians. You would need an 8 or 10 part series to do justice to all that,
right,
including the families of jazz. I mean, the families of jazz in New Orleans go way back. So I'm hoping I'm hoping another young filmmaker can come along, and somebody can say, hey, you know, that film taught me a lot about jazz, about its roots, about American music, about New Orleans. And I want to go explore deeper into what Michael couldn't cover because
Right.
of time constraints. That's what I'm really hoping. And its response so far has been amazing to the film.
Yeah, no, the film has been great, and like I said, you compress a lot of material into the time frame you have. And on top, there's depth too, because one of the sub themes I think is definitely, how this music and specifically the people of New Orleans use music to, confront New Orleans' own troubled political history, the South's troubled political history, and America's political history, and the Black experience in America. Starting from, you mentioned the 1800s all the way, through Jim Crow and segregation and to today. A tough question, but do you think that there is some quality about the music that originated in New Orleans, jazz, rock and roll, and to a certain extent funk, that made it particularly well suited to address these tough political issues?
Well, that's a beautiful question, Brian. Early from the get-go, I wanted to weave in a thread of the struggle of civil rights and Jim Crow, and how the music was, for a lot of people, and it still is today, a vehicle to address social justice, racism, bigotry, all of that. Music can unite us. And I was determined to keep that thread going so that people understood, not only appreciate the music and its messaging, whether it was music to get up and dance, whether it's music as solemn at a jazz funeral, or just an incredible performance by Mahalia Jackson to address what she felt was wrong in America. That was done on purpose. But your question was, there's another song I put in there on purpose, which was Blackbird. And people have questioned me about that. And I read an article about how Paul McCartney, how they wrote that song Blackbird to address what they saw in the civil rights struggle in America. And in America was important to me because being from New Orleans and being a Southern person, people always say, race issues is a Southern issue. No, it's America's issue.
Yeah.
It's got to be addressed. It's not a Southern thing. And that's why I inserted that song, plus Terrence's performance of that song. And I got to say, it brings tears to my eyes. But the message is there, and people are picking up on the message. We've had screenings in Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., here in New Orleans, different cities. And it's been amazing to me, the number of audience members who have come after me, to talk, to say what a moving experience they had, and they had never seen a music cultural documentary unfold like that. So thank you for bringing that question up.
No, absolutely. And it's something that, executive producer and artistic director of this film, Terrence Blanchard, who we said was supposed to be joining us, but I guess must have been caught up in some other things, continues to address in his music. And so much of New Orleans music continues to address. One of the other great issues I think that you address in this film is, I forget who said it, but so often the musicians in New Orleans historically had to leave New Orleans in order to be recognized. So you think of someone like Louis Armstrong, who had to go to Chicago and then New York, or even, the hip hop, early New Orleans hip hop, Cash Money Records, who had to be signed to Universal, or Def Jam South. They need outside exposure to be recognized in New Orleans. My question is, do you feel like in the current landscape, do you feel like that's changing? Do you find that talented New Orleans musicians from New Orleans are choosing to stay there, or people are choosing to relocate there? Is it becoming its own kind of proving ground?
And I know for sure Terrence wanted to join this conversation because he and I talked about it. So whatever pulled him away, audience, my apologies, but Terrence is really a professional. So something happened, and he could answer that really well. Here's my take on it.
Mm-hmm.
In a city so rich in talent and music performances, where it's 7 days a week, all these different clubs, people on the streets, and this is just my take, the fee structure for a musician to be able to make a living, raise a family, send their kids to school, do all the things all of us strive to, because the locals are so used to really getting an incredible amount of great music.
Right.
$10, $5, $8, you go to these clubs, and I understand when musicians reach a certain level of experience, some, because of the needs to support their family, lift themselves up, need to leave to make a better living, but they always come back with those experiences.
Right.
And I think right now the city, there's no music anywhere. I mean, in terms of making a living, these guys, these men and women, are struggling again. So, I think once the touring happens again, they'll get on the road and they'll be able to make a decent living. But they will always come back. There's something about the city; it brings you back, and it's just, I don't know. Music's in the air. It's in your blood. It's a substance of life here. We feed off of it, and
Totally.
and I think I think for all musicians everywhere in the world, a big percentage just doing their art and paying the bills is a struggle for everybody.
Yeah, right now especially. And yeah, every time I go, that's what I appreciate most. This is music coming out of every door. The film is called Up from the Streets, and I think you can make a case that the literal streets, because they were places where musicians would convene and play and share ideas, shaped, the direction of that music's development, or that city's development. So I wanted to ask you this. You said you wanted this initially to be a multi-series project, and making a documentary about 300 years of musical history. Yeah, I mean, this thing could have easily gone, you could watch 72 hours straight. Part of the creative process for a documentary filmmaker is to omit things, to know what to cut. Was there a performer? Was there a part of history that, just killed you to have to remove from this film that you wish you could have included?
Well, yes, there is, but it's not maybe what people are thinking, because for one thing, a lot of the performances I had to condense. Some other performances I let run full, and that was a matter of pacing, knowing that I had to fit so much in. But what I really regret having to do is that when you mention Wynton Marsalis and Branford and Delfayo and Jason and Terrence Blanchard and Ben Jaffe, and interviews that I've done with Alan Toussaint, Dr. John, all of these guys, I have all of these guys. I must have 2 hours of interviews with all those people.
Yeah,
all those people talking about this city, this culture, this music. And man, if I could ever do it, I think there could be a documentary that basically is multifaceted, where you just have people talking, these artists, in a very passionate, knowledgeable way, expressing their love for this city and its music. That was the really hard part for me, because the film, my cut 36 was about 25 minutes longer.
Okay.
And my distributor said, "You got to cut it back, man. It's just, it's too long for the American audience." And I went, "Oh God." So I had to go back in and trim and trim and trim and trim. That was a struggle. It's a struggle when you're doing something like this. When you're doing a film that's a biography of one artist, or if I would say, okay, I'm going to cover 10 years of New Orleans music.
Right.
But when I bit off 300 years, there were times where I would go to Terrence and I go, "Man, God, I need some help." And he would go, "Michael, you're the filmmaker, man. I'm a musician. I'm an artist. You're an artist." He said, "Just make the film you want to make, and I'm going to support you. So just go back at it. So that happened a couple of times. Any filmmaker, you start questioning your decisions a little bit.
Oh yeah.
But questioning it, it's a good way of finding out, getting somebody to give some feedback. So yeah, good question, great question, because there was a lot I wish I could have done.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, we should mention. I mean, the film is a nice blend of you mentioned the interviews. There's new performances, you film performances, archival stuff. It's great. On the flip side of that question, are there new, up and coming, young New Orleans musicians that you're glad that you got to shine a spotlight on?
I mean, yes, there are, no doubt about it. And there's, if I could roll off some of the names, I would. And
I know, like Tank and the Bang Tank, is a phenomenal vocalist and really putting the city on her shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, she's in the film, and I wish I could have had more of that.
Yeah.
And I got to say, when I sat down and talked with Manny Fresh, he was such a joy to talk to. And then getting to talk to him about his music. But then when he would go back and tell me how he got some from the Meters, he got some from Alan Toussaint, he got some from the Nevilles,
right?
And he reached way back. That's an area that, I would like to explore more, because I'm not a musician. I'm a filmmaker. And I understand when somebody is telling me, but I would like to be able to show those influences in the current music being done, because it's still there. That thread is there. And that's the best way I've answered that. And and I've got to be honest too. This film, what year is this? This is 2020. So
I know it feels like these past couple of months have been years unto themselves. So
right. So this represents 3.5 years.
Wow.
Making this film. My living room was my edit room. So for that long, I did not have a living room. And my entire focus was on this film. And I cannot wait for the virus to be dealt with in a manner that all of us can go out and listen to music again, because I want to go to music clubs again. And I want to see some of these young musicians that I've heard about, but I've never seen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're coming up. I mean, a quick story on that. Troy Andrews.
Okay. Trombone Shorty.
I'm a shorty. I've known him since he was 5, 6, 7 years old. And I was asked to put together a band for a wedding years ago, and the couple only had $150. And I said, oh my God, okay, I'm going to do it. I'll find somebody. And I was walking across Jackson Square, and I saw this little kid with the horn was bigger than he was, and his group was just having this amazing sound. And I didn't know who they were, so I walked over, introduced myself to him, and I said, hey, my name's Michael Murphy. And he said, yeah, my name's Troy, Trombone Shorty, they call me. And I said, I've been watching you. I'd like to hire you for a wedding. And he said, well, you have a quarter? And I said, yeah, I got a quarter. He said, well, you got to go call my mama. So we went to a payphone. We called his mother. He got his mother on the phone. Well, look where Troy is now. And there's a lot of other Troys on the street corners of the city. There's a lot of other ones. And I want to go explore those again.
All right, man. Another documentary. But meanwhile, 3.5 years of hard work is coming to fruition. The film comes out, virtual cinema release, Friday, May 15th. What does that mean, virtual cinema release? How can people watch this film?
So it's basically an on-demand streaming service.
Gotcha.
So you go to the link in the press release, and that will take you to a list. At this point, there's 95 theaters across 35 or 40 states. Whatever county you want to click to, or city, whatever the case is, you click on that and you buy your ticket, and it's on demand, and you can watch it anytime you want, when you want it, for 72 hours. But at the same time, the film's available for 30 days. So for 30 days, you it's up there. You can watch it whenever you want. And the beauty of it too is that a portion of all the proceeds go back to the city of New Orleans, to the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation, and then they're taking that influx of funds and they're donating it to the artists and the musicians of the city to keep them going during this COVID-19. So
excellent.
yeah, it's really cool. It's really
Just
cool.
beautiful, man. Yeah, it's a great film. Watch the trailer. It's out now. And if you really can't wait, Terrence has also put out a playlist on Spotify and iTunes. So with Big Frida on it, Mahalia Jackson, Louis Armstrong. It's a great place. It'll get you in the mood for sure. Michael, this has been great, man. Thank you so much for chatting with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
the film is awesome.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank all you guys there. This was really great, so appreciate it. And you're a good interviewer. You're a good interviewer, man.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it. Yeah. Be well, stay safe, stay healthy, and maybe I'll see you in person on the other side of this thing.
Sounds good, man. Take care.
Right. Bye, Michael.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot for tuning in, everyone. That was Michael Murphy, again, director of the film Up From the Streets, New Orleans, the City of Music. It's coming out Friday, May 15th as a virtual release, which means pay-per-view streaming. Thanks to Michael for chatting with me today. Thanks also to Mac Avenue Records and to Smoke Session Records for making this episode possible. We will see you tomorrow with Ricky Riccardi. He is the director of research for the Louis Armstrong Museum in Queens, and he's going to walk us through their new virtual exhibit. Friday, May 15th, we're going to wrap things up with singer-songwriter Kat Edmondson, whose new album out is all about dreams and dreaming. We're also going to speak with Jazz's online editor, Matt McCucci, about 5 albums that turned 50 in 2020, including some really, really iconic ones. Bitches Brew, we're looking at you. I'm Brian Zimmerman. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.